You are listening to Kubernetes Bytes, a podcast bringing you the latest from the world of cloud-native data management. My name is Ryan Wallner, and I'm joined by Bhavin Shah, coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. We'll be sharing our thoughts on recent cloud-native news and talking to industry experts about their experiences and challenges managing the wealth of data in today's cloud-native ecosystem. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. We're coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. Today is November 21st, 2023. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. Bhavin, how have you been? I know you've been doing a lot of travel. Are you glad to be home?
I am. I sure am. I was excited for the travel, before the travel, and now I'm just glad that I'm glad it's done. Last Thursday, I think N-1 day before my conference trial was done, I was like, shit, I want to go home. I want to go home.
Yeah.
I can't have excitement to talk to people at the booth. Like, even nothing to the people at the booth, but it was just like, I'm done. I didn't have the energy.
Your battery runs out.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a battery. Some people's run out faster than others, and it'll happen to everyone. And I don't blame. I don't blame you for being like, I don't want to talk to a single person today.
But one cool thing, when I was in Denver for the supercomputing conference last week, right? Tim was there too. Like, I know you, Tim. You know Tim. But he drove me to his place in Estes Park, and I met his dogs. And man, they are so cool. Like, they just hang out with you, and they immediately start being your friends. I was like, okay, I was super pumped to meet his family and the dogs.
You got to see his mountain as well.
Yeah, dude, it's a crazy driveway. I was like, I couldn't drive with his truck. I was like, I don't know how you are making these turns. Obviously, he has done that for thousands of times, but still, it was a crazy.
Yeah, he's got to clear it and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, those stories. I'm like jealous, but no, it's a lot of work all at the same time.
Yeah.
But it is a beautiful piece of property. I saw he posted that Kubecon recap sort of video where he climbed to a nice view and stuff. I was like, to be able to do that out of your backyard. That's
his own property. He didn't have to go to a state park or a national park. It was just right there. Yeah, I know. It's a really cool location, but again, as you said, a lot of work. I kept telling him on our way there, I can't do this. I can't do this.
I can't do this.
Yeah, I'm not dude, I'm barely able to keep up with the condo in Arlington. I'm not going to be able to manage and sustain a cabin in Estes Park. So,
yeah. Hey, to each their own, right?
Mm-hmm. How was your Kubecon travel?
Yeah, no, I can't complain. It was pretty easy. I know I had some travel right beforehand, and so I got back from KubeCon feeling the same way, glad to be here. Although I think I came in from KubeCon 11 p.m. in Boston, and then I went to bed when I got here. Yeah. It was an hour away. Woke up, packed, and we drove to Vermont. So I wasn't home for very long.
Okay, you still had travel. Yeah.
But that was like a family getaway travel a little bit, just take some time off, which was really nice.
That's awesome.
It was up there for the weekend, and it was cool because we were near Stowe, Vermont, which is beautiful, and the season when you're up there at that time of year, right in the first few weeks of November, sort of Vermont's half and half in winter and still in fall.
Yeah.
Half the tops of the mountains are all snow, but then the bottoms are green still.
Nice.
And then you can take pictures where there's snow falling in the background, but you're still in a green pasture and stuff like that. So it's kind of awesome. This this cool.
Yeah, I didn't know you were in Stowe because last time we drove there, I think in September, we found a really cool cocktail bar. It had the setting of a ski resort, a pre. I guess I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was really cool. Good drinks.
Yeah, that's a good place.
Yeah.
Stowe is very cool. It's got, for a Vermont town, you gotta put it in perspective. It's never going to be big if you're in any town in Vermont, right?
There are 5 restaurants.
Exactly. There's a couple breweries, a couple good restaurants, those kind of things. And if you like being sort of remote, it's beautiful, and we always like getting away there. So, that's what I did, and now we're back here and we're ready to do our KubeCon episode.
I know. I'm always pumped to do these. I had somebody I know we'll talk about this about how KubeCon went, but I had one of our listeners stop by the booth and what are you going to cover in the news? Ah, you have to wait.
Nah, no sneak peeks. Yeah,
Yeah.
we did have a few people come up and shake our hands, say hi, and we
I know.
really appreciate that
I
because
know.
that
Oh,
like gives
loved it.
like living proof that people are listening, which is always really helpful
I
to
know.
to our own ears and egos, that we're not just doing this talking to ourselves. So
Even though like I like talking to Ryan, like we still like when we don't hit record, like we're still doing the same things that we're doing right now. But
yeah,
it's always good to get that validation. Like, okay, it's not just a bubble that we're talking in. Like there are people that are listening to us. Thank you, everyone.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for being listeners and coming
Yeah.
to say hi. That was very cool.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're post KubeCon, pre
Mhm.
Thanksgiving, and we're gonna do our news episode. We like to do news in an extended fashion, but really
Mhm.
around releases and sort of
Yeah.
things that came around that week,
Mhm.
so to speak. So we also have some kind of themes and thoughts of our own that we'll
Yeah.
bring into the fray here because our experience at KubeCon might have been a little different than some, or may have been similar in ways. So we like to share that, and hopefully that's useful for folks who didn't get to go
Yeah.
as well. So let's start off with how the show was in general for you, Bhavin, and maybe how it compared to some of the other ones.
Yeah. I think KubeCon Chicago kept getting better, right? I've only been to 3 KubeCons, LA, Detroit, and the one in Chicago. This
Yeah,
one was the best for me. I think in terms of the number of people that attended, and for surprising, like I spent most of my time at the Portworx booth during the actual conference days, and there were a lot more people that were willing to have a conversation and ask
yeah,
questions. And I was trying to relate it back, right? Like you remember the talk that we attended at DevOps Days Boston,
yeah,
where Pete was talking about zero interest rate projects or ZERP projects,
yeah,
and how everybody wanted to spend developer time and solve things that were already solved in the vendor ecosystem. And I think that was happening till last year. Now I think things are getting expensive, right? You can't have developers just work on some smaller open source project that eventually helps you. I think the build versus buy discussion is happening inside bigger
yeah,
organizations, and then that has, this is just my assumption, right? That has forced people to see like what solutions are out there and how they can plug these into their existing stack rather than trying to reinvent the wheel because they want to custom make something for their own organization. So I think
mm,
with that background, I had a lot of conversations around, again, for Portworx, right? How have things changed?
yeah.
What's new? How can Portworx help us? Things like that. But yeah, really engaging KubeCon for me. How about you,
Yeah.
Ryan?
I think, when you look at Detroit, it was
Mhm.
definitely bigger than Detroit. But if you look at the previous
Yeah,
KubeCon in Amsterdam, it's actually smaller, right? So
yeah.
I think Amsterdam was around 10,000
Hmm.
and Chicago was around 8,000, I think is the
Oh,
numbers that I've been hearing. So it
oh,
was less people.
okay.
And I did see that in a few different ways, right? So like, I don't know if you remember. Oh no, you were in Amsterdam, right?
Nope. Not
So
me.
yeah, so Amsterdam was bigger by a couple thousand people, and like the cube, the sort of cube crawl,
Yeah.
the nightly sort of thing that they have on
Hmm.
Tuesday or Wednesday. Um, that was definitely, it felt like a lot less people were in the show floor
Yeah.
for that cube crawl on in Chicago.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was just the difference of a couple thousand people
Yeah.
or if it was just the way the hall was set up or whatever. But there was still a good amount of people there. But I noticed a little bit of difference,
Hmm.
and I'm not exactly sure why. And it could just be an EU versus America's thing
Yeah.
in terms of interest or that kind of thing. But 10 to 8, and I also had a couple conversations around folks that budgets are shrinking,
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
unfortunately. So maybe there was less people that got the budget to fly
Hmm.
and attend, but it was a little smaller, but it still had a really good
Interesting.
energy, like you said.
Okay. Like
Um,
I've heard different numbers, so I think we should see what CNCF eventually publishes. I've heard like 15,000 people at Chicago, not 8,000. So I don't
no,
know.
I mean, this was from the CNCF.
Oh,
I'm
it was
pretty,
okay. So
yeah,
I
or
okay.
from
What I heard
someone
was
who's
not from CNCF.
involved.
Yeah.
I think it
Damn it.
was around 8, but 15 would be very surprising if that turned out to be the number. We'll confirm and put it in the
Yeah. Yeah.
show notes though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think to your point where I think it did have a slightly different sort of feeling to it in the
Mhm.
sense that I think it spoke to the maturity of where
Yeah.
Kubernetes is, right? I read an article and I think I put it in our notes here about, it was from Forbes, but the whole idea around it being that operators have arrived, right? It's not just developers who are part of the projects and project teams and open source community. It's like, no, we're sending people that have money and budgets, and executives are now showing up to basically make decisions, right? Is the way I took this article. And I wouldn't really disagree, right? I think people are getting to that point where it's like, okay, there's no turning back, that this is a platform that's here to stay. So, we're coming here with our checkbooks, so to speak. Not literally, I hope, but
oh, I would love to see that, dude. Like cloud native, but the transactions are still done through paper. Yeah,
like
that would be
deal
awesome.
At the booth. Yeah, I'm sure it's been done before. But.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I mean, what do you think, maturity wise? Where are we at?
No, I think from a maturity wise, I know like CNCF mentioned they've crossed the chasm a couple of years back. So we definitely see that evolution, right? In terms of the attendees, but even in terms of themes, like in terms of what everybody on the show floor or in the keynotes were talking about, it wasn't just about, oh, how cool Kubernetes is. It was always about like how people are using Kubernetes to do everything, right? And I know for the keynotes, AI/ML was like a huge thing. Like if you just
and we will talk more about AI because it was undoubtedly the favorite thing and term to talk about in Chicago.
Yeah, so it was always about like how Kubernetes is that platform or that underlying layer that's supporting all different use cases. So agreed, right? We have matured enough that people are trusting Kubernetes as that platform, or they are investing heavily into this and trying to find alternatives from whatever they were using today and see how Kubernetes fits into their use cases, fits into their deployments, and then selecting Kubernetes as that platform for the future. This can be to run containers, this can be to run virtual machines through the KubeVirt project that we have spoken on this episode, things like Wasm, any like serverless with Knative, you can run any kind of applications, right? Kubernetes is that data center OS as Ryan likes to talk about. So I definitely agree that was the trend. Like Kubernetes is here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no ifs and or buts about it. So I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things I think, but before we dive into maybe some specific news, I did want to talk a little bit about the themes. We covered AI as an obvious theme. I think without a doubt was a standout theme, even though there was not like a ton of talks. Like there was talks that had AI
in it. No, I think my observation is AI was a theme for the keynote, but then when you actually walked around the show floor, it hasn't permeated enough that all the vendors are just talking about AI. Like there were definitely some AI messaging here and there, like AI enabled IDPs and things like that, but it wasn't an AI conference just yet. Not just,
and it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
and it shouldn't be. Although I did notice that if you went and talked to some of those vendors, right, and said, hey, AI is here and is penetrating the thoughts of the KubeCon attendees and vendors. What are you doing with it? They would probably come back and tell you, they do have a project going on, or they have it tied in here and there. At least that's the what I notice is that if you kind of poked at what people are doing about it, there's active stuff. So I think maybe we'll see, next KubeCon, there a lot more talks that have, here's what we're doing with this model, or that kind of thing.
I think it was definitely top of the mind for all the vendors. And then I think next year you'll see not just talks, but also like productized things around AI that is actually using, say, an LLM or building their own LLMs for Kubernetes. So I think that's going to happen. Like just one of the vendors on the booth, Llama. I think that's a really cool name, Llama. And they had like awesome llama stickers that they were giving away. It is just like a 3 or 4 year old company. I stopped by their booth. They were surprised that CNCF used them as an example to talk about AI on Kubernetes, but they're like, they allow you to download all the LLM models on your laptop, and then you can just run prompt engineering on your laptop instead of sending all of your data or all of your prompts to OpenAI or other vendors that host these models for you. So they are like really hard on the experimentation phase right now, just trying to see how this will work. But right now they have a solution that like is pretty cool. You can install it on a Mac or a Linux box or on a Kubernetes cluster and get local access to LLMs without having to send things over to OpenAI.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Llama, because I was part of the Data on Kubernetes day one event, and that was a really great event. They did a really good job, putting those on and kind of
Mm-hmm.
making it feel like a separate thing that you were
Yeah.
at. But there, I was at a talk about vector databases,
Yep.
and it was really well done. But I sort of learned more about the community and things like Hugging Face
Yeah.
dot co. And I don't know what it is about the names that people are coming up with in the AI community,
I know.
but I kind of love it.
Yeah,
Right,
I
some of
know.
them are sort of terrible and funny, but then like Hugging Face and Llama, and I
Yeah.
don't know. There's just something about people are having fun with it, and I don't know if it's just like because we're so early on, it
Yeah.
hasn't like marketing hasn't grasped their hands on it and named it something like
Traditional
super
corporate
boring.
marketing. Yeah.
um, but I kind of like where that
Yeah.
whole community is right now. Like, just Hugging Face is the community. Like,
I
I don't know if you're not familiar with Hugging Face, and that's the first time you're hearing it, you're probably like having the same reaction I did, which was like that's the name of it. Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but
No. It was like it doesn't clearly say what it does, right? So like even when I heard about it a few months back, it was like, okay, let me Google what this is. Like, why is everybody talking about it? It's like a GitHub for your models,
yeah, pretty
just
much it's the
in that
community.
one
Yeah,
line description. But check it out. Like, it's free to use. You'll see
it
all
is
different
really
kinds of
cool.
models,
Yeah,
and you can download and start using them. So do it.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it might as well just be named like banana peels for
Ooh, that might be slippery.
oh, you can't say. There's one model on there that I actually saw in a thread on Twitter, which
Uh-huh.
is about it's basically a model that you can run, and it uses your camera and in
Okay.
real time has David
Oof.
Attenborough narrate you. So
Nice.
like based on what you're doing, and
Yeah.
I'll post the link to the
Okay.
to the Twitter in our show notes, but because the video that this tweet has is
Nice.
fantastic. But it uses your real time. So if you like
Hmm.
make an expression with your eyebrows or take a drink of water, it'll do it in sort of like a
Nice. You have
planet
your
Earth style
yeah.
way, and it's hilarious. And
Nice.
these are the best things that AI can be used for,
Nice.
really. um, yeah, I don't know.
Awesome.
That's just me.
No, and I think talking about like continuing our themes discussion, right?
Yeah,
For the show floor,
bring us back on track, Bhavin.
trying to. No, a lot of platform engineering, right? Like IDPs. They're like one of the vendors that I found. Shit, I forgot their name, but they took a different approach on IDP. Usually, whenever we talk about internal developer platforms, we talk about creating golden paths for developers to deploy resources, right? Just
Right,
do things this way. But they had a different view. Like instead of that, they were focusing on the you build it, you run it philosophy. So like, oh, you built X number of services. Now you are on the hook for
right,
managing them on a daily basis. So they gave like a cool dashboard which aggregates like PagerDuty alerts, Grafana or Prometheus metrics. It just aggregates everything, gives you a neat dashboard like how all of your services are doing, what needs to be fixed. If you had any specific log events, they'll show it to you. So like every morning, first thing in the morning, the developer can just log in, look at all of their running services, figure out what needs to be fixed, and then they can like go and continue doing their or pick up another Jira ticket to work on. But that was a cool interpretation of IDP for sure.
yeah. This is like platform engineering going to a level where it's like you want to build it, you want to run it. We're going to give
Yeah.
you some training wheels,
Yeah.
right? We're going to try to make it as easy and
Hmm.
accessible as possible so you can succeed at this, and I
Yeah.
don't have to run it for you.
Yeah. But yeah,
This is
there were
the
a
way I
lot
feel.
of those traditional IDP vendors, right? Like, oh, as an admin, you can create blueprints on how to create like an S3 bucket or any object storage bucket, and the developer can choose from a drop down like, oh, I want to create a blob storage bucket in Azure instead of S3 in AWS, and it had the administrator can configure or use APIs from the cloud providers or Terraform and configure everything on the backend. So for the developer, it's really easy. So like I think platform engineering, I know it has been a buzz for a while,
Yeah.
but it's getting real. Like there are actual tools that people can start using.
Yeah, like my take on platform engineering was, yeah, it was still a big topic and it was still
Hmm.
part of the conversation for most people. Um, but I think we're still in the process of figuring out what's the right way to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Like, not that it's not real, it is
Hmm.
real, and people are kind of figuring out now. Okay, well, how do I concretely get there? And
Yeah.
that's where I think the blueprints come in. That's where I think like how do you actually build the platform and how do I do it in XYZ manner.
Yeah.
I think another part of this, which we both put in our notes here, which was the platform engineering maturity model,
Yeah.
which was from the
From
application
CNCF.
delivery
Yeah.
tag. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was very cool. We'll put a link in the show notes, but basically, it is a white paper from the application delivery tag. I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
the right
true.
group.
Like App
Yes.
Delivery Technical Advisory Group,
Yes.
they did a white paper and now they followed it up with like a model where they have
Yes.
different stages that your organization can be. So kind of like the DORA metric reports that come out, like, okay, your organization can either be in the provisional, operational, scalable, or optimizing state of platform engineering.
Yep.
And then they look at different aspects from like, how do you get investment for platform engineering? What's the adoption like? What are the different kinds of interfaces people can use? How are operations being handled and how do you measure things? And they rate like, okay, across this complex matrix that we'll put a link in the show notes, but they tell you where you are if you are doing these things when you're talking about platform engineering. So again, I think it's more about giving people yardsticks to measure themselves against. Like, okay, I thought I was doing platform engineering the best I could, but I can be doing things better. So I think that's what this maturity model will help bring to the community.
They have a couple images in that white paper too that I think are really helpful.
Yeah.
One is the capabilities of platforms. Find that in the page contents, which is really the relationships between what they talk about as products, platforms, and capability providers. So it really kind of, I think, puts into a nice concrete example of like when someone says platform, what does it actually mean, right? And the northbound and southbound are actually fluid interfaces, right? In the sense that a platform is not the same thing, and it won't be the same thing no matter probably which organization you look at it, right? It'll have some like some common pieces, right? Identity, data, artifacts, those kind of things, observability tools. But then there's north and southbound stuff. And then a second one was sort of a graph based on where you are in that maturity model. And one thing I took out of this paper was that in every case, it kind of says that platform engineering is a slow start, right? And I was like, this is a very valid thing, but I also want to say that a lot of things are slow starts, right? Even if you were like to say how you're adopting DevOps, right? A lot of times it's some tools, some groups kind of advocating, some champions kind of pushing, and then you kind of cross this boundary. So find both of those graphs. I think they're really useful if you're into this kind of thing.
I haven't looked at that graph, but I'm assuming that, okay, once we go through the slow thing, it just becomes a hockey stick graph and like, let's go. Come on.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, not so much hockey stick exponential growth, but it does take off after a certain kind of
nice.
crossing there. Anyway.
No, and I think one of the other things that I like while talking about platform engineering, right? Talking to the actual practitioners or operators, as you mentioned, one thing that they're struggling with right now is that multi-cluster, multi-cloud thing. Like, even though there are like the 100 level examples, right? Oh, creating object storage bucket, that's good. But then what about the hard things? Like, how do you manage your access credentials across all of these different clouds and across all of these different clusters? How do you do that? I think that's one of the challenges that a few people that I spoke to are facing, and they're like, let's solve those, and then we can go all in to platform engineering, because many of these organizations have some form of a IDP built over the years, which used to help developers provision VMs, and now they have evolved it to provide Kubernetes clusters or namespaces on demand, and they want to move towards more of that cloud native platform engineering stack. But then I think once we solve some of these day two challenges, I think that's when it becomes like super real. So
and that boils down to like, what's the real value you're providing, right? And the graph I think that I was talking about also kind of talks about value, right? Once you're providing enough value, and that number is not a thing, right? It's it's different everywhere, but your users will basically be pulling instead of resisting, right? And that's that flip that they talk about between I think it's the operational and scalable layers.
Gotcha. And I like that Spotify likes to share these success stories, right? Like, I think the one blog that they published like 2 or 3 months back, they were like, 96% of their developers are already using the Backstage based IDP that they built, and they didn't even market the IDP to all of these different developers or internal business units. People, once the snowball effect started, they had to like get some, they had to put in some work to get the snowball rolling, but then once they did, I think it created an avalanche, and like a lot more people signed up, and that's the default way inside Spotify right now. And I'm so happy with myself that I got the whole avalanche thing going. Like, oof.
Nice. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Actually, the couple of things we had listed here was application platforms, which kind of just ties into the platforms things that we were talking about. Security, always sort of a big topic when it comes to KubeCons and where we are, just in the world with technology. And then multiple clouds, multiple clusters. I know it's weird I pronounced both words, but yeah, multi-cluster, multi-cloud. I think we're also sort of a parallel topic to a lot of different talks. I saw a lot of people describing their architectures using multiple clusters and how they're doing that with different tools and different applications and kind of those kind of things. So I don't know about you, but those were the other couple that I had.
No, I think, agreed. Multi-cluster for sure. And security is always there, right? Like, I can't ignore security. Like, if you do that, that will be not great. I know in the news section, we have a few.
Not great was not the way probably a lot of people describe it.
It becomes a resume generating event. Like, if you mess up on security, like, nope.
Or resume depleting.
Ooh,
event,
nice.
Depending on how that goes for you personally. Okay, so let's dive into an article or two while we still have some time left. How about you go first, Bhavin?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with one of the big vendors in the ecosystem, right? Like Microsoft. Obviously, Microsoft announced a lot of enhancements to AKS, not just during the week of KubeCon, but also Microsoft Ignite, which was last week in Seattle. But I just wanted to highlight two things that are relevant for our audience. Azure Backup for AKS is now generally available. They announced this as an alternative to just backing up Azure disks. So now this is a solution that's available in the Azure UI or the Azure portal. It is based on Velero. It's a simple extension that you enable for your AKS clusters. And then you can just select, what namespaces you want to back up, and it backs up not just your PVs, but also all the different Kubernetes resources that you might have running. So a good tool to use, simple to install if you are already using AKS or if that's your one cloud solution that you have for Kubernetes. And then the second thing from Microsoft that caught my eye was a new operator that they like to call Cato, which stands for Kubernetes AI Toolchain Operator. And it's another managed add-on for AKS, but it simplifies the experience of running open source AI models on your AKS cluster. So it automatically provisions the necessary GPU nodes that are required.
If they're available.
Yeah. For sure. Yes, if they are available. And then like it reduces like the onboarding time, right? So it helps you to focus on AI model and usage rather than infrastructure setup, because they handle all the orchestration of AKS and the worker nodes with GPUs in them. One cool thing that stood out was like they manage these large model files as container images. And they do this using the operator. So like if you have a model, it can be stored in your Microsoft container registry as a container image. It gets pulled down. You run it on your AKS cluster by automatically provisioning those worker nodes, and then you can run inference through that. So a really cool open source operator that Microsoft is now talking about. I don't know if they have been talking about it before, but now with the AI spin on everything, this is something that definitely caught my eye.
Yeah, here's a very specific example that from the article that I want to point out. That we were talking about how the names are kind of funny. Right. So they're talking about inference servers being one of the things they deploy. And the two that they describe in this article is such as Hugging Faces 7B, right? That might as well just be goobly globbly glibbity bop, right?
Nice.
And then you have NVIDIA's, which is like NVIDIA's Triton interface inference server, which is like, okay, well, marketing got a hold of that one.
Corporate marketing.
I had to bring that full circle because it was just like the absurdity in one sentence.
That's true. Okay, how about you go next, Ryan?
All right, since we're on the topic of AI, I did want to bring up Cast AI's announcements around. It was two different announcements. It
Yeah.
was automated workload right sizing and precision pack. I'll describe a little bit about what those two things are. But Cast was one of the companies that we covered in our cost
Yeah. Yeah, we refer to them whenever
breakdown.
they raise their funding before as well.
Yes. Yeah. So now they got an additional Series B. I forgot when exactly that happened.
They
35
announced it
million.
during KubeCon, so like
Oh, they did.
recent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was 35 million Series B from Vintage Investment Partners and existing ones from Creamdom and Uncorrelated. Anyway, the point being is they were a cost optimization platform, which there's a number of these out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cast being one that really focuses hard on this AI aspect and bringing it into the fray, right? These new capabilities are, I think the first one is a little bit self-describing in the sense that workload right sizing is something that we're constantly pulling at straws, trying to get right. That's the idea that when you provision a pod, it has CPU and memory associated with it, and what's the right scale out and CPU memory for each one of those pods and containers, and how do you always make sure that that's right sized in the sense that for how it's running, where it's running, those kind of things. So this is basically Cast's version of being I think by default, Cast already makes recommendations like every 30 minutes or something. And so this kind of pulls it into the fact that where it can automatically kind of ensure that those workloads are running most efficiently and sized in sort of a cost-aware, holistic approach to resource utilization. And then the precision pack is something that's a little bit different in the sense that it's based on scheduling decisions. So if you're familiar with Kubernetes, Kubernetes makes some basic scheduling decisions based on where it's going to actually put that pod. And there's a number of different ways it can do this, bin packing versus sort of spread and those kind of things. Well, this kind of is Cast's approach to taking a cost aware and sort of it is a bin packing algorithm, but it will do things in such a way that workloads have to move around less is the way that I mostly took this on. So overall improves efficiency, and we'll do this based on sort of their cost optimizations and things like that. So again, I think these types of announcements in companies, this is like the very beginning, right? In the sense that we're starting to see tools and models used for real-time decisions, making those inferences based on real data that's being produced at an infrastructure layer, scheduling layer. Just because, the complexity that Kubernetes and running, tons of applications on Kubernetes is becoming, I think these tools are going to be vital for operating and managing. And to make an aside based on this, right? We mentioned complexity, right? Complexity was a topic in some of the keynotes as well in Kubecon. And we'll also put an article in here from the new stack that talks about Tim Hawkins' sort of complexity budget and that he talked about at the keynotes. I didn't go to the keynotes fully. I watched a few out in the kind of foyer area by the show floor. But the point being is that we're making Kubernetes do all the things, right? Cue all the things meme, your favorite one. And Tim's basic point was that developers and maintainers should consider whether it's going to make things a lot more complex, because one of the things in the article I think is like, no is temporary, yes is forever, right? If we keep adding things and at which point do we blow the budget, right? Blow this proverbial complexity budget? And I would be in the camp of like, we're already pretty dang close.
Yeah, it's about that opportunity cost, right? Like if you say yes to this, what are you saying no to in the future? And what if that thing is more important? So I like that there should be a balance for sure in like what things you're agreeing to and what things you're saying no to. I like the quote like no is temporary, yes is permanent. That's
I like that one too. And if I find out who and where where it was actually said, I will make sure it's accredited, but it's somewhere in this article. I also want to like I also want to tie the fact that I feel like OpenStack went through a very similar
Mm-hmm.
thing where, it so many projects kept spurring off,
Yeah.
and it got very, very complex doing a lot of things. And my hope is that we don't like do the same thing to Kubernetes. Right? I think this is sort of what Tim is sort of,
Mm-hmm.
so,
Leaning towards. Yeah,
yeah,
because
without talking to him, but
like I know CNCF likes to focus on Kubernetes as the platform to run AI. Even at the supercomputing conference, there were already vendors that were starting to talk about Kubernetes. So it was like, okay, Kubernetes was not built for running AI workloads. It
can
was,
it?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. At 10 years back,
I
like
think the
when,
difference is we shouldn't bake in first order objects
yeah,
or projects that do AI. It's fine to use Kubernetes as a base to
yeah,
run your AI stuff
yep.
on, or create another like company or
Mm-hmm.
project, but like let's not make it part of core.
Yeah, yeah, not part
Yeah.
of core. Yeah, it
I
should
think
be
that's
like
mostly,
operators, custom
yeah.
resources, just
Yeah.
like
Tack it
Kubernetes.
on.
Let that be your reconciliation loop
Yeah.
for anything and everything, but not
Yeah.
make it heavier. So, agreed.
Yeah. So anyway, this is a really good article. If you were
Hmm.
at the keynotes, or if you weren't, go watch them. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot to be learned about this type of conversation in the community,
Hmm.
especially if you're getting involved or you are involved as part of projects, or a maintainer, that kind of thing. So
Okay.
yeah, I know. We took an aside from Cass, so I'll throw it back to you, which is which is
No, yeah,
that
for
was kind of
sure.
like my second.
No, all good. I think the one last thing on casted, like the total money raise is $73 million, and I'm sure like cube cost might be in somewhere in that range as well. So it's like there's a lot of money being invested in solving these challenges. So maybe you can figure it out on your own, but if not, there are vendors that are working on it. So go check them out. Like I'm sure they have like a free solution that can help you do some basic analysis on your clusters today. Uh, Next, I want to talk about like our friends at Red Hat. Like they had they had a few different announcements. They participated in multiple day zero or day one events. Red Hat Device Edge is now GA. So like Red Hat had like a mixed edge computing strategy. They had different answers there. Now they're like, okay, we're calling anything that's edge related as Red Hat Device Edge. It's now GA. It has two different variations or deployment options. It is built on the open source community project called Microshift, which is like a lightweight OpenShift deployment, and an edge optimized OS that's derived from RHEL or Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And then when you're deploying device edge, you can either select RHEL and Podman for very small deployments with static applications, and only when you want to bring in the orchestration capabilities of OpenShift or Microshift, you can select that second deployment option, and that allows you to deploy containers and manage them locally. But then a few other things that they made GA: hosted control planes for Red Hat OpenShift on bare metal and for Red Hat OpenShift virtualization. Hosted control planes is actually a really cool project. Like I think there's an open source variation as well, but it allows you to create these multi-tenant clusters, or create like a master cluster and then all the child clusters or worker clusters, where you don't have to spin up or dedicate VM based nodes or bare metal nodes to run control plane components for your actual workload clusters. The control plane components actually run as pods on the master cluster. So you gain a lot of infrastructure efficiency. The spin up times are way faster. I don't know. I'm a big fan of hosted control planes. I wanted to share that with the community. And then if you are using Red Hat OpenShift service on AWS or Rosa, you can now run virtual machines because now they support metal instances in AWS. I'm still having a hard time justifying why somebody would spin up metal instances in the cloud because they are expensive and then run virtual machines on OpenShift. On-prem on bare metal, I completely get that. But again, they do say that they have a few customers that are asking for it. So OpenShift virtualization on Rosa is now GA as well.
Mm-hmm. I think I could see the use case around development and things like that, or
Yeah.
testing, right? When you want sort of that like full environment, so to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah.
And I think it makes sense, right? Like they don't force you to get metal instances. It can just be a temporary node group that you deploy like with a machine set configuration, get spun up, you do your testing or whatever you want to do, and then you can scale down the cluster. So
Yeah.
I think there's still some value, but just the cost might be expensive.
Yeah. So, going back to the Red Hat device edge thing,
Yeah.
we covered Cube Edge
Mm-hmm.
in one of our previous episodes,
Yep.
which is a much larger architecture for how to run edge and how to talk back to your core cloud and those kind of things. Do you think this is definitely the start of what we're seeing from Red Hat when it comes to maybe building like a full sort of edge cloud
Yeah.
cloud to edge kind of capability that we see in the KubeEdge world?
No, I think agree, right? Like they do have their multi-cluster manager in ACM or advanced cluster management.
Right.
So I haven't tried this out personally, but I'm assuming that if you have Microshift running at these edge locations, you can manage all of these sites from that ACM deployment that you might have. So like there are some capabilities for sure that will help you to manage everything centrally, set security policies centrally using your advanced cluster security tool or ACS.
Yep.
I think there's definitely value, but I think they still want to keep the footprint at the end edge to be as low as possible, because
Absolutely.
again, as we discussed some of the challenges earlier, right, it was in the edge computing episode, these are smaller devices, not server grade, not data center grade, so you want to make sure that whatever you're running is lightweight.
Yeah, and I think that was called Edged, right? Is sort of their little runtime in KubeEdge.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm more curious because I think Red Hat, with its sort of track record with management operations, being something they're very good at, in terms of usability of their UIs and kind of deployment, those kind of things. I could see them offering a very specific version of sort of ACM and Red Hat Device Edge that also has all these other things tied into it, like syncing data back and forth and having device twins and all these things, right? More tailored to like, here's an architecture, but from Red Hat. So I'd put that on my predictions.
Nice.
For 2024.
That's awesome. And then I know around the edge computing space, right? Since we are on the topic, another vendor in the ecosystem, Zedida, Zededa, or from my friends in India, Zededa.
Zededa.
Yeah, they announced like an edge Kubernetes service, which is like it's supposed to be like industry first fully managed Kubernetes service for the distributed edge. So it's trying to solve all the same challenges like unreliable security, lack of skilled IT personnel, undependable network connectivity. But then they are partnering with Kubernetes ecosystem, like vendors from SUSE to Canonical to OpenShift, like trying to support those distributions on their edge deployments as well. But yeah, if you are looking at building out hundreds of edge locations, check out this new vendor in the ecosystem as well. They refer to some like Gartner studies that say 80% of all customer software will be running at the physical or physical edge by 2028. So they have some analyst numbers to back it up. But yeah, a new service that's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So another big topic was the Kubernetes API Gateway 1.0 is live. There was a whole bunch of great articles and talks and stuff like that around that. If you're not familiar with the Gateway API, it's really, I like to describe it as sort of like ingress.next, so to speak, but also tailors to both getting traffic into the cluster and intra cluster and intra cluster.
Nice.
If I'm saying that correctly. Basically, it's sort of the next rendition of how services are handled. It's definitely has a lot more features, a lot more kind of like usability, so to speak, for how things are doing. It's been in progress for quite some time, but this is officially 1.0, and there's a whole bunch of great articles that I won't even try to start speaking to, but you can start using it and having it be stable. The other article I had around Gateway API is solo.io, is one we've talked about in sort of the service mesh category and stuff like that. They announced their fully conformant implementation of Kubernetes Gateway API within the Glue Gateway.
Okay,
so
nice.
Lots of terms going on there, but I think this is something that we consistently will start to see from the networking and services vendors, is kind of conforming to make sure they're using Gateway API as others.
Dude, 1.0 is a big deal. Like, okay, I think a lot of vendors will start paying attention. Like, and even though I work for a vendor, but I didn't know anything about it. But okay, I need to check it out. Like, what is it? Like, how does it work? So Thank you for bringing it to the episode, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, next up, security, right? Okay, let's talk about a couple of security vendors. Aqua Security announced additions or new features to their Trivi open source image scanning tool. They announced the ability to generate K-bombs or Kubernetes bill of materials, which are basically a list of all the different Kubernetes components that you're running in your cluster, including control plane components, node components, add-ons, including their versions and images. Now they announced the capability to do vulnerability scanning of the components in KBOM. So like not a huge feature, but I think just making things better and better. And then one of these, like another new vendor in the Kubernetes security ecosystem, StackLock. I know people who are familiar with Craig McCluskey. He was one of the
Yep.
original Kubernetes guys, right? This is one of his new startups after Heptio. So StackLock is focused on improving the security postures, not just for developers, but also for open source communities and for organizations that are building using containers. I really like their theme on the website. They are all into marmots. They are animals that you find,
Marmots,
I think, Pacific Northwest. At least that's where I've seen them. But yeah, they announced like 2 open source projects. One called Minder, which has its own marmot logo, but it's an open source platform that helps development teams and open source communities proactively manage their security posture. So, like if you're working with multiple repositories, how do you do the repo configuration and secure those? How do you do dependency and license management? So it helps developers by enabling them to make better choices and enforcing controls. And then finally, helps them with artifact signing and verification using this open source Sigstore project. And then Trusty, which is something that actually I found better for some reason. Trusty helps you as developers, right? You like to use a lot of open source libraries, and sometimes there are these malicious techniques through which attackers can get into your environments or your application code, called starjacking or masquerading or typo squatting. What they have figured out using this open source project is, if you are trying to figure out if this is a good open source repo to use or not, you can actually, like, they will help you score, like they will give you a score based on their own data driven scoring method, where they look at package provenance information, where they look at the GitHub stars activities and figure out whether a package which was supposedly just called marked, marked, but a new malicious package showed up as marked.js, which made sense to some of the JavaScript developers, but then wasn't an actual package. It was just a malicious package that, again, JFrog published back in 2022. So Trusty will help you choose the right solution or right package to use, and not allow these malicious things in your application code as you're building your apps. So another cool vendor to look out for.
Nice. So while you were explaining all that really useful information, I was in the background finding the marmot funny video where I don't know if you've ever been on, seen the video of the marmot standing up and saying like, Alan, and then he goes, Steve. Anyway, I put the link in here because that is a marmot.
Okay.
In case anybody was wondering.
Nice.
What it actually was. And if you don't and never have seen it, click on the link because it's just hilarious. At least I think it is. Anyway.
Yeah, again, I'm just taking down notes to make sure I check all of these things out. Cluster gateway API number 1, and then maybe maybe the marmot video.
No, you watch the marmot video first.
Okay, definitely. Cool.
Yeah. Cool. So the other ones I wanted to cover here was that Crossplane, which we just had on the show.
I know.
Was talked about as an incubating project. I think it happened either September, October, but it was brought up in one of the keynotes. It's really exciting stuff for them. Open telemetry also is 1.0, which is a big
big milestone,
a big update, and there's a lot of different integration happening there. I know the Prometheus project is getting to that point, and there's some others that have already sort of integrated it seamlessly to get all the logs and metrics and all those things all together. So really cool stuff there. Speaking of Grafana, we both put this one here, so we might as well cover it. There's been some sort of built-in updates for Grafana Cloud around Kubernetes cost management. Again, this like Cast and KubeCost, like we covered on the show before, this is sort of Grafana doing its own thing, and just kind of, I think, speaks to, I think where we're at with operating and managing Kubernetes clusters. This is clearly top of mind, and it's funny because I didn't put cost as a theme. But it's definitely up there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing that I wanted to talk about around Grafana was they have had their Grafana Cloud, which is a SaaS offering where they host the Grafana instance for you. But now they have a solution where you can install their agent on your Kubernetes clusters and ship metrics to the SaaS portal. So making it easier instead of you having to deploy and manage these instances, even if you're running a Kubernetes cluster on-prem. Install the agent using a simple Helm chart and it will connect back into your account and show you metrics for your cluster as well. So
nice
update.
Cool. So I think we might have not covered every single link we had in here. Okay.
I know.
We will still put them all in the show notes.
Yeah.
But I did want to end with a few of our much more general thoughts. Right. We covered that Kubernetes is maturing. It's not just growing and focusing, but really what we're seeing is a focus. A double click on stability, security, and things built on top, right? Things like platform side of things, and we covered that a bunch today. Platform engineering is definitely something that people are thinking about how to expose this to, their internal customers and or external, I guess. The other thing I wanted to mention here, which on top of the complexity, which we talked about already, which is retaining talent is tough, right?
Yeah.
I found there was a lot of people searching for roles at this KubeCon, and it may just be, economically where we are and where the market is.
Yeah.
But this is a little call to action to any of our listeners. We would love to aggregate any jobs you have in the Kubernetes space and put them out to our community and to our listeners. So definitely go and send those to us. If we find any, we'll make sure and put them on our Slack. We'll create a channel just for this kind of thing, or for jobs that we have that you want to post. So it was tough to see that, and maybe it is a number of different things, but retaining talent seems tough these days.
I know, and this talent is not cheap, right? Like people with the Kubernetes skill set. I know we have been on a growth trajectory, and more people are getting started with it. But it's still far and few. Few, I don't know how the phrase goes, but they're not enough. Not enough, man.
No, but I like the audible there. And let's hire people, because I think for a long time we were trying to hire the Kubernetes sort of unicorn, which is the person who knew how everything in the Kubernetes stack worked. I think we're getting beyond that point. Let's hire specialists who know a part of the Kubernetes thing really well. Maybe that's security, maybe it's application delivery, maybe it's CI/CD. Let's start doing that more, right? I think someone knowing everything is someone who probably is going to be less useful to you in the long run anyway, because it's just impossible to keep up. So
and it's just like they'll be so expensive. Like again, this is not related to Kubernetes, but with all the things that are going on with OpenAI right now and how they are signing letters and they've ousted the CEO. I see like tweets from Mark Penny, of the CEO of Salesforce, on Twitter. They're like, if you are somebody who wants to leave OpenAI, send me an email at CEO@salesforce.com.
Just openly,
openly
sharking.
just poaching people. Like, come on, join me. We'll match your pay. We'll give you all the options that you need. And so, like, expertise in relevant or popular fields is important. So
there's no shame.
Yeah, no shame, dude. But that makes me feel good as somebody who's trying to like think about that new ecosystem, right? Like, okay, this is the next place to be. Let's just skill up. So not just around AI, but at KubeCon, even though we are talking about like practitioners and operators, right? I did get like a few questions around like, oh, what resources do you recommend for me to get started, or have the new guy that joins my team get started with Kubernetes, hands-on labs, or just like training courses. I recommended all the CKA certifications that CNCF has, Kubernetes the hard way, and then for sure Kubernetes Bytes, the actual podcast, right?
Can learn a few things. I did have someone tell me that they used a few snippets from our podcast in an interview.
Nice. I'm hoping the Marmot video makes it the next thing that people talk about in interviews.
It's got to be number one. That's funny. Well, as always, please go and give us a rating wherever you can on where you podcast. Join our Slack.
Yeah.
The easiest way to do that is kubernetesbytes.com. It'll be top center of the page there. And just definitely encourage people to reach out, send a message, review us wherever you can, hit subscribe if you're that kind of person who listens on YouTube.
I know. Thank you. Like our YouTube subscribers have been going up, like not as much like as our audio listeners are, but it's going up there, dude. Come on, more people need to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel.
So thank you for that. And as always, this brings us to the end of today's episode. I'm Ryan.
I'm Bhavin.
And thanks for listening to another episode of Kubernetes Bytes. Thank you for listening to the Kubernetes Bytes podcast.